issues. Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel. Attorney General Nessel, we would like you to respond first of all to the allegations that we just played before the break of the candidate who is targeting you and also parroting these election conspiracy theories. What's your response and how are you doing personally?
Well, let me say this. Firstly, I think it's important that people remember that the investigation that he's talking about was referred to my office by the Republicans on the Senate Oversight Committee in the state of Michigan. And what they did is they did a extensive analysis and review, and they conducted hearings over the course of 6 months on the issue of whether or not there was any election fraud in our state. They concluded that there was none, but they did conclude that there were actors out there, bad actors, that were essentially exploiting people and using it to raise money. And that, this individual, Matthew DePerno, they suggested was one of those people. So the Republicans in the Senate referred that for criminal investigation to the Michigan Department of Attorney General. And it was shortly thereafter that Matthew DePerno declared his candidacy to run against me, and then declared that he instead would like to prosecute me. Now, I isolated myself from that case, so I have nothing to do with it. But the important thing is he is utilizing that to call for me to be locked up and prosecuted. And I take him at his word that if he does beat me in 2022, that's exactly what he intends to do.
Pretty frightening. If you could pull back and tell me what your thoughts are and what's going on here overall. Hillary Clinton the other day said that we are still very much in the midst of a constitutional crisis. Does this reflect that?
I absolutely believe that it does. And I should say this, that, the attorneys general in the United States, for each of us in our respective states, we are the top law enforcement officials. And you hear all of these AGs talking about how they subscribe to the rule of law. They're rule of law AGs or rule of law AG candidates. And yet here they support a man who we know did everything in his power to bend and break the law in order to undermine the 2020 election, which I think is not a very law and order position to take. But if people like Matthew DePerno end up winning in these significant swing states for both Attorney General and Secretary of State, I think democracy as we know it will be completely gone by 2024, and that irrespective of who gets the most votes, the candidate of their choice, which clearly is Donald Trump, will become president, and we will be reduced to, I guess, an oligarchy, much like Russia or other states of that nature, and will no longer be a democratic republic.
Madam Attorney General, good morning. It's Jonathan Lemire. Two questions for you. One on that. Beyond, of course, just winning an election, are there any safeguards that be put into place in your state to prevent something like that from happening? And secondly, just on a personal level, how are you feeling? Obviously, Michigan, the governor of your state, was the target of a kidnapping plot last year that was broken up by federal investigators. Obviously, a very dangerous situation there. How afraid are you for your personal safety?
Well, honestly, very afraid. And it's not just the governor, who, of course, has been the primary target, but myself, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and frankly, both elected and appointed officials all over the state of Michigan have been subject to threats for quite some time now. And that goes all the way from the President of the United States to, public health officials, to members of school boards. There is no one seemingly who is safe at this point from this type of rhetoric. And do I think that it's only a matter of time before we have people who actually act on these threats? Absolutely, I see it coming, and that's why we've cracked down so hard in our state on hate crimes and domestic terrorism, and why we had to create an entire unit in the office that does nothing but that.
It's chilling, but it's a real threat, and you live with it every day. Attorney General Nessel, let me ask you about the investigation that already have taken place in your state. There was one from the Secretary of State and one, as you just laid out for us, from Republicans in the state of Michigan that found, yes, Joe Biden did win. I should also underline the race wasn't particularly close in Michigan relative to, say, Georgia, where it was less than 12,000 votes. Joe Biden won Michigan by 154,000 votes. So are you confident that the two investigations that have already taken place were exhaustive and conclusive to find that Joe Biden did win Michigan, and that indeed these rallies and this call for another investigation is simply frivolous and simply politics?
Well, look, there's a reason that Donald Trump and his campaign did not request a recount, which is normally what you do if you think there's an issue, because they knew there was no way they could ever possibly make up a 154,000 vote difference. So again, we've had these 250 audits, but pursuant to constitutional provisions in Michigan that were conducted by our Secretary of State. We have both Republican and Democratic clerks from all around the state of Michigan who have indicated that the election was safe, secure, fair, and accurate. And now you actually have the Auditor General, who was appointed by the Republican legislature, who is doing yet another audit. So I don't know how many audits you have to do to come to the same conclusion, and that is that Joe Biden overwhelmingly won our state. But I think that Donald Trump and his minions are simply not going to be happy and are satisfied until someone, somehow, some way, comes to the opposite conclusion, whether that is an accurate conclusion or not. And I think it's actually being used as a litmus test as to whether or not he will support candidates in this state. You have to say that you want a forensic audit, whatever the hell that is, by the way, because it's not a real phrase, right? But unless you say you are for one, and unless you come to the conclusion that the election must have been stolen and that somehow Donald Trump must have been the real winner in our state, you are not going to get his support for the nomination for any race, no matter whether it's governor of our state or whether you're, running for a local school board.
All right, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, thank you, and thanks for rolling with the audio issues. We really appreciate hearing from you this morning. Thank you. And a related story out of Texas.